Protesters in Taipei called for more action to right the wrongs of Taiwan's authoritarian past. A lot more talking, but still no agreement on a joint presidential ticket between the country's two main opposition parties. Migrant workers used the Halloween weekend to protest their working conditions. And we're in central Taiwan to shine a light on how one community is keeping their cultural heritage alive. A warm welcome to TaiwanPlus News. I'm Betty Chen. In a run-up to parliamentary and presidential elections, activists are urging politicians to right the wrongs of Taiwan's authoritarian past. Rick Glauber reports from a demonstration in the heart of the capital, Taipei.
Here in the center of Taiwan's capital, Taipei, activists are demanding the removal of a statue of one of Taiwan's most controversial figures, former leader Chiang Kai-shek. They say the city should not be commemorating a brutal dictator responsible for a crackdown that left thousands dead or disappeared.
他这样子的一个违法的一个屠杀，他是一个不只是一个独裁者，他是一个已经政治档案已经证明了的真相，他是一个杀人犯。
But others view him as a strong leader who helped Taiwan keep communist China at bay and grew the country's economy. Many people are against removing statues of Chiang. Taiwan's government has been pursuing what's known as transitional justice. They've been pardoning political prisoners, redistributing ill-gotten gains, and removing symbols of Taiwan's authoritarian past. Elections here are now just a few months away, and they could bring a change in government. Activists here are encouraging the government to finish the job they started. Chris Ma and Rick Lowett in Taipei for TaiwanPlus.
To learn more about transitional justice in Taiwan, TaiwanPlus reporter Bing Wang spoke to Jieting Ye, editor of Ketagalan Media.
Who is Chiang Kai-shek and why is he such a controversial figure in Taiwanese history?
When he was while he was in Taiwan, he basically instituted martial law, creating a authoritarian state in Taiwan all the way past until his death and afterwards. And so during this time, to consolidate his rule, he basically used a lot of very oppressive policies in Taiwan, and that's why he's such a controversial issue. That's why he's such a controversial figure in Taiwan.
What's the story behind the statue in the center of Taipei, and why is it so divisive?
The Chiang Kai-shek Memorial, that's in the middle of Taipei, is built shortly after his death in the 1970s. You know, it's basically a big monument to a figure that some sees as a ruthless dictator that caused the disappearance and the deaths of many of his political opponents. There are people who see him as a leader that they believed in. And so having a monument to somebody like this in the middle of Taipei really speaks to how much power he had while he was a dictator.
Why is this period, White Terror and Chiang Kai-shek's rule, still so relevant in Taiwan, and how does it form local politics?
The political cleavage today is such that you still have people who are pro-KMT and believe that for whatever wrongs that happened in the past, the KMT did create, they did do some good in Taiwan. And then there are the people who believe that, well, you can't just, the good and the bad just don't cancel each other out. You still have to answer for the crimes of the past. And I think for today, the transitional justice includes individual cases of people that were wrongly accused or oppressed or persecuted, but it also includes something as big as the state symbols in Taiwan.
Again, that was Jieting Ye from Ketagalan Media speaking with Bing Wang. Taiwan's two main opposition parties have met to discuss forming a coalition, and while they have agreed on a number of shared goals, the most crucial question was left unanswered. Sally Jensen has more.
After weeks of back and forth, Taiwan's two main opposition parties are still unable to come to an agreement on forming a coalition in a bid to unseat the ruling Democratic Progressive Party, or DPP, in next year's presidential elections in January. Eric Chu, the chair of the Kuomintang, or KMT, sat down with Ko Wen-je, the presidential candidate and chair of the Taiwan People's Party, or TPP. And the two sides discussed for just over an hour what forming such an opposition coalition might look like. Here's what they had to say.
如果要合作，那当然不管科侯科是不是在同一张选票上面，我们也是尊重国民党的意见的。对我来讲，就是说你有个公平的双方可以接受的办法，那就可以了。
They agreed on a number of areas they would cooperate, including working together to win the most seats in the legislature and pursuing closer, more peaceful ties with China. But there was no conclusion on perhaps the most crucial question of who would be on the presidential ticket in any opposition coalition.
我们都会希望努力达到国会的席次极大化。前一段时间拖了一段时间，有很多的民众会不耐，甚至愤怒我们这都表示抱歉。我昨天已经讲过了，我们会努力加油。
Now, as I say, these talks have been going on for weeks now, and with less than 100 days until voters go to the ballot box to choose their next leader, Lai Ching-te, the DPP's presidential candidate and the current vice president of Taiwan, is still leading in public opinion polls. And with the KMT and the TPP unable to reach an agreement on forming a coalition, this may jeopardize their chances of gaining power. Alex Chen and Sally Jensen in Taipei for TaiwanPlus.
Democratic Progressive Party presidential candidate Lai Ching-te has hit out at talk of his two main rivals joining forces ahead of next year's election. Lai said his two rivals' less cautious positions towards China would make an alliance between them a win for Beijing.
我们大家如果问魔镜，全世界最希望下架民进党的是谁？那魔镜一定会跟你回答，就是中国共产党。如果你再问魔镜，说最希望蓝白合的是谁？答案也一定是中国共产党。
Taiwan's foreign ministry has congratulated David Adiang, the new president of their diplomatic ally, Nauru. Adiang was elected after the previous president, Ross Kun, was ousted in a vote of no confidence last week. Adiang is Nauru's longest-serving lawmaker and has been the country's justice and finance minister. Taiwan's foreign ministry says the two countries will continue to work closely together. Taipei streets were packed with people this weekend between Pride and Halloween celebrations, but that didn't stop a group of migrant workers from raising their voices to protest poor labor conditions. Joyce Zheng has more.
It's the end of October, but these are not Halloween costumes for those wearing them. Behind the white sheets and ghostly faces are migrant workers who say this is a reflection of their grim working conditions in Taipei. Chanting "No treat, only trick," the small group of protesters gathered outside the capital's main transport hub, just a short walk away from the presidential office and other government buildings. They're calling attention to Taiwan's poor track record in its treatment of migrant laborers, with stories of exploitation, discrimination, and abuse being common.
他们今天的扮成鬼，然后集结在这里，他们想要跟各位表达的是，我一个人做不到，但是我希望可以集结所有人的力量，我们一起呼吁台湾政府。
Taiwan relies significantly on migrant labor, with more than 700,000 working in industries like manufacturing, fisheries, and healthcare. And that number is expected to rise as the country edges closer to becoming a super-aged society, where 1 in every 5 people will be over 65. Many of the people now caring for Taiwan seniors are from abroad. But unlike neighbors Japan and South Korea, Taiwan only has official labor agreements with 4 countries: Indonesia, the Philippines, Thailand, and Vietnam. And though meant to help these migrant workers, many of the officers assigned to support them don't speak their local languages, leaving the workers to rely on third-party brokers, who they say take advantage of that dependence.
Karena setiap kali saya pindah majikan, saya selalu harus membayar job. Dan bayar job itu selalu sangat tinggi sekali. 75.000 NT dolar. Sangat berat sekali. 10.000 aja berat, apalagi 75.000 NT dolar.
The Labor Ministry has said they're setting up ways for migrant workers to negotiate their contracts directly with employers and the government, an old promise that has yet to be fully realized. Though this protest may not have gained as much traction as other events this Halloween weekend, the reality migrant workers face is much more harrowing. Delphine Chen and Joyce Zhen for TaiwanPlus.
Coming up after the break.
Hoping to protect the country's biodiversity, activists in Taiwan are speaking out for those without a voice.
For more stories from Taiwan, around the world, and in front of a World War II-era aircraft carrier, please download the TaiwanPlus app. It's bigger than it looks.
In the face of adversity, the power of truth.
A roadmap for a just and open world. Charted by the freest country in Asia.
5, 4, 3, 2.
A warm welcome to TaiwanPlus News. I'm Ian Kavat. Taiwanese semiconductor giant TSMC.
Public buses to be electric by 2030. A mission that begins with listening.
And telling the stories of Taiwan.
In Taipei for TaiwanPlus.
Drawing insight from original thinkers.
And sharing it with the world. TaiwanPlus News, a voice of freedom in Asia.
Welcome back. You're watching TaiwanPlus News. As Israel continues its ground offensive in Gaza, the military is renewing calls for people in the territory to evacuate.
בשבועיים האחרונים אנחנו קוראים לתושבי צפון רצועת עזה והעיר עזה להתפנות דרומה באופן זמני. ההתפנות דרומה היא לביטחונם האישי. היום אנחנו מדגישים, זוהי קריאה דחופה.
Israel's army has reportedly made it over 2 kilometers into Gaza. The ground offensive is part of what Israel calls the second phase in its war against Hamas. Gaza's health ministry says nearly 8,000 people have been killed in the territory since the war began 3 weeks ago. Protests have erupted around the world, calling for an end to the hostilities. As Israeli officials are now stepping up their offensive on Gaza, hundreds of thousands of people around the world are calling for a ceasefire. Harrell Hughes reports.
Chants for a ceasefire, echoing around the world. Israel's assault on Gaza has entered its 4th week, and Israeli officials have announced a step up in their offensive. In response, this weekend saw hundreds of thousands of people around the world taking to the streets to call for the conflict to end.
Many Jews, like me, reject what Zionists are doing in our name. We reject the genocide that is continuing in Palestine, and the savagery is quite unbelievable, and that our people with our history can do this in my name is just not okay.
On October 7th, militant group Hamas attacked Israel. The Israeli government reports over 1,400 people were killed and an estimated 200 taken hostage. Gaza's health ministry says Israel's armed response killed over 8,000 Palestinians in Gaza. It's a conflict that has left the world deeply divided. 139 countries currently recognize Palestine, but many Western nations do not, including most of Europe, the US, Canada, and Australia. There are also fears that an escalation of the conflict risks expanding to the wider region.
İsrail, biz de seni savaş suçlusu olarak dünyaya ilan edeceğiz. Ve şimdi bunun hazırlığı içindeyiz.
Protesters in Western nations called for their governments to stop support and funding for Israel, saying the country's assault on Gaza amounts to genocide.
No es una guerra, es un genocidio.
We're here to demand an immediate ceasefire, to demand an end to both U.S. and Canadian funding and support of Israel's genocide, and also to call on Canadian people to join us, to take a stand.
In Israel, families of hostages and those killed by Hamas joined protests aimed at Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
כמה ידיו מגואלות בדם. עד מתי? מתי? מה עוד? מחר ילדיך? נכדיו? איפה? למה?
As people march and protest around the world, in the West Bank, residents of Ramallah hold a candlelight vigil, praying for a ceasefire for Gaza. Delphine Chen and Harel Hughes for TaiwanPlus.
China has signaled it is open to restoring high-level military channels with the United States, while hinting that outside provocation is to blame for tensions with Taiwan.
不能把自己的安全建立在别人不安全之上，更不能在重大敏感问题上故意挑衅别国。台湾是中国核心利益中的核心。
China's second highest military official Zhang Youxia was speaking at the country's largest military forum in Beijing. He also said the country will deepen strategic cooperation with Russia. China cut off military communication channels with the U.S. in August 2022 when then U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi visited Taiwan. Japan's defense ministry has released new images of China's Shandong aircraft carrier entering the Western Pacific. The Shandong and 4 other warships were spotted 460 kilometers south of Japan's Okinawa Islands. Analysts say China's military is trying to familiarize itself with the Western Pacific region. China last sent an aircraft carrier to the area in September. At that time, more than 100 warplanes were spotted flying around Taiwan. For more on the ship's role in China's Navy and what its development could mean for Taiwan, our reporter Sam Hui spoke with Lin Yingyou, an assistant professor at Tamkang University's Institute of International Affairs and Strategic Studies.
China now has 2 aircraft carriers. How is the newer Shandong different from the first aircraft carrier, Liaoning, and how does it compare to U.S. carriers?
美国一个航空母舰，它可能就是有近80架、90架，可是解放军的航空母舰，它顶多就是30架到40架，所以会代表为什么解放军它会需要双航舰、双航母的这样的一个战略。主要的原因是因为在它的架次上面，它没有个办法跟美国来做一个相提并论。
How important is the Shandong?
山东号它代表了解放军是有能力来复制一艘航空母舰，等于说它借由这艘航空母舰去累积它的经验，那在借由这一艘试验的结果，再把这些相关的技术应用到下一艘可能福建号上面，它会有什么样的一些新突破？不管是在电池的弹射机，还是它会不会有可能使用核动力？我想这一些不会是只有福建号，而是后续的航空母舰都有可能会有这些新科技的应用。
Shandong is on a training exercise near Taiwan. Is this a threat to Taiwan's national security?
我个人会认为，现在解放军的演习，它是完整的一个攻台的想定，会先借由海上的一个部队来切断我们，或者是包围，造成我们的一个我们所谓的 A2AD， 就是所谓的对台湾的一个封锁。 再来利用海空的力量对我们台湾进行本岛的打击，最后才准备进行登陆。
China is building a 3rd aircraft carrier, Fujian. What can you tell us about this type of carrier? How is it different from the Shandong and Liaoning?
所以我们要看的是未来解放军在海军战略上面，它会走向美国一样，以航空母舰作为打击的主要的一个兵力，而其他的船舰是在防护防卫航空母舰，还是像俄罗斯以前苏联一样，航空母舰反而是用来掩护它的海军，而主要的打击兵力反而是动武武。
That was Professor Lin Yingyo from Tamkang University's Institute of International Affairs and Strategic Studies speaking to our reporter Sam Hui. Taiwan has high levels of biodiversity, but many wild animals still face threats. To raise awareness, thousands of people attended the 35th Annual Walk for Wildlife in Taipei over the weekend. Sally Jensen has more.
野生动物正告急，野生动物正告急，犬猫有家不游荡，犬猫有家不游荡。
Holding banners, singing, and bringing furry friends along for the ride, crowds take to the city streets for ecological preservation. Taiwan is a highly biodiverse country, but many of its key species are endangered. These include Formosan black bears, green tree frogs, and Formosan flying foxes. Organized by conservation groups in Taiwan, the Walk for Wildlife has been held annually since 1989.
因为民众大部分都只知道说栖地破坏或者是陷阱猎捕这一些对他们是很严重的威胁，但是大部分民众其实不知道，游荡犬猫在外也会对这些野生动物造成很严重的威胁。
Taiwan's Biodiversity Research Institute has found that the number of wild animals taken to rescue centers because of attacks by cats and dogs has tripled over the last 10 years. Earlier this year, the Agriculture Ministry launched a project to try to stop such attacks. But the government says there's still some way to go.
我不否认，我们可能还有人力上面、资源上面怎么样带更充足的部分。但我可以在这边跟大家承诺，从民进党团的角度，从我自己作为一个立法委员的角度来说，我们会来全力支持，从科学的角度来做管理。
Activists say that to protect wild animals, the public also needs to do their bit.
我们可以不分野共的，大家一起合作，来让所有的动物适得其所，让犬猫回归人类家庭，让野生动物少了一个来自于犬猫的危害。
The Walk for Wildlife in Taipei has been growing every year, showing a sea change in public opinion. Wildlife activists, conservationists, zoologists, and concerned members of the public are marching in central Taipei to speak out for those with no voice, Taiwan's wild animals. They say endangered species like pangolins and leopard cats face growing threats like overdevelopment and domesticated animals. And with enough people supporting their cause, Taiwan's wild animals may stand a chance of survival. Alex Chen and Sally Jensen for TaiwanPlus.
Over the weekend, residents of Qingjing in central Taiwan came together for a distinct cultural event that saw them pay tribute to their heritage. Yu Jing Huang has more.
Warding off bad spirits and welcoming new beginnings. Residents of Qingjing in central Taiwan's Nantou County celebrate their ancestral culture. This church festival originated in southwestern China. It is shared by multiple ethnic groups in Yunnan province, who use it to mark the new year. In the 1960s, some 200 immigrants from Yunnan moved to this part of Taiwan. Although calling the area home for more than 6 decades, they only began holding this event around 17 years ago as a way to hold on to their roots.
但最重要的就是说，透过这个活动的时候，我们会让3代、4代的后辈能够记起来，他祖辈是从云南来的。
This community's establishment is tied to the Chinese Civil War during the 1940s. It was built by the families of veterans of what is known as the Orphan or Lost Army. After the Chinese Communists defeated Chiang Kai-shek's Nationalist Army in 1949, some nationalist troops withdrew from Yunnan, crossing into Myanmar and Thailand. There, they continued to stage a military stand against the communists across the border. But as they began to wear out their welcome with the locals, Chiang's government was forced to evacuate them to Taiwan. Qingjing was among the relocation sites for evacuees. The soldiers were given farming land to start their new life in Taiwan. The mountainous geography here closely resembles their homeland in Yunnan. But while that place has long been under communist rule, Qingjing residents still proudly fly the Republic of China flag. During events like the Torch Festival, those who share this community's history also come from out of town.
感觉比较亲切吧，因为我们也是外省人的第二代，爸爸也是属于外省人，所以说他们这边也是属于外省人的交流嘛，所以变成说这样传承下去，我觉得还不错。
The two-day festival doesn't just feature the Yunnan connection. It also highlights bonds between this community and groups that settled here much earlier. Ren'ai Township is also home to 12,000 indigenous people from several different groups. They regularly take part in the Torch Festival to foster a sense of shared community.
他们也因为政治的关系，所以他们也迁到这边，所以变成是我们这边也算是跟我们共荣共存。那我觉得这个也算是一种考验仁爱乡的一种算是团结的一个时刻。
The Torch Festival started as a community celebration, but over the past 2 decades, it has steadily grown. Organizers now welcome anyone who appreciates their culture to participate, and they hope that each new person who joins will also be helping preserve this distinct cultural treasure. Devon Tsai, PG Zhuang, and Yujing Huang for TaiwanPlus.
Thank you for watching TaiwanPlus News. Finally, today we leave you with images of the 2023 Taiwan Pride Parade. I'm Betty Chen. Take care and see you next time.